I was on state assistance when I was a teen mom, and I started making money maybe late 20s, early 30s. And I remember looking at my bank account. I was sitting in $1 million house with a Mercedes in the driveway, and I still felt like that broke teen mom. And really the problem that I wanted to solve for myself first and then for other people was
Andrea Crowder, 7-figure entrepreneur, coach, and the host of the Unruly Entrepreneur podcast.
when people experience it for the first time with me, they're like, this is sorcery, this is magic. And I'm like,
She teaches women to master their own mind, body, and emotions so they can create the life they desire.
if I were to take all my work and distill it down to like a very simple process, it would be
Are there other models that you've found useful that somebody could try?
the area that creates a lot of suffering for people around numbers is the meaning. So I try to,
Is there a message that if you could kind of like install in everybody's minds, what would that message be?
the number one thing that I work with everyone on, and it's like an energetic leash that's fucking with people, is
Well, great to have you on the podcast, Andrea.
my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, while looking at your work, I was so curious because you talk about wealth and money in such a different way, and you approach it in many different dimensions that I have not seen many people approach. One of the things that you talk about is something that you call wealth patterns or wealth dimension patterns.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Wealth alignment patterns are looking at where it is that you're trying to go financially, and then shifting from an unconscious level how you are getting there. So most people are trying to do it through the form of discipline. I don't believe in discipline. I believe discipline eventually expires and burns us out. And when we approach it from the energy of devotion, but also supporting with unconscious beliefs, which can be so quick and easy to reframe, then that big, like heavy lifting energy of trying to overcome sometimes even generational patterns with money feels light, easy, and effortless. So my intention with wealth alignment patterns is to change the way your experience of money feels. So it's less actually about what you do with the money. I mean, I teach that. I teach more practical approaches, but specifically with wealth alignment patterns, it's more about your experience of money. People can, I'm sure you've probably experienced this, or I know for me, I came from being super broke. I was on state assistance when I was a teen mom, and I started making money maybe late 20s, early 30s. And I remember looking at my bank account. I was sitting in $1 million house with a Mercedes in the driveway, and I still felt like that broke teen mom. And it just felt like I was constantly swallowing razor blades. And so the feelings that I was having versus the actual experience that I was having with money wasn't matching up. And I remember thinking I did all of the things that everybody told me to do in order to be successful. And really what I wanted from success was satisfaction from it, yes, but also was seeking peace. And really the problem that I wanted to solve for myself first and then for other people was how to create that inner peace around money. So when you log into your bank account, you feel sensations of neutrality or maybe even positivity. Or when you go to make maybe a more risky investment, you're making that with more blood in your brain, because when you're afraid, blood leaves brain, making you very strong, very fast, but also less intelligent. So I really was looking to create a process for people where they could increase intelligence, increase intuition, and also have a more emotionally supportive and positive relationship with money.
So I'm curious. So you said, from what I've understood, and correct me if I've misunderstood anything here, so wealth alignment patterns is about aligning your emotional self to your psychological and your practical life. And you're
Right.
saying when you were already successful much earlier in life, you felt like there was still not giving you that experience of life. What was the problem? Like what leads to that kind of experience for somebody to have that kind of dissonance of saying, I have this money, but I don't feel wealthy? What according to you happens?
Yeah, traumas, beliefs, generational thoughts and patterns that we grow up with. So anything happens when you're emotionally charged at any point in your life, it gets stored as an event. And sometimes this could be really beautiful and helpful. So you can probably think of a time with your wife right now where you have this beautiful emotional charge and you can reminisce upon it and remember it and re-experience it in a really beautiful way. Maybe you guys are watching a sunset together and you instantly, most of the time I ask people, where do you feel that? And they're usually like in their heart space somewhere. And then people will talk about, for example, their money, and they're like, I see there's money in my bank account, but I'm terrified, I'm petrified. Like, well, where do you feel that? It's generally like down here in your like gut or here, or sometimes even in your chest. There's this like density. There's, I've heard of the book, The Body Keeps Score. I haven't read it. I understand I understand like the premise of it. And so my understanding of what's happening, because I'm trained in rapid resolution therapy, is that through the lens of my training, there's, if you imagine like your computer, you have like, if you're me, you have 75 open tabs bare minimum.
You sound like my wife.
That's on a good day. Hello, ADHD, loud and proud. So I look at my computer and I'm like, okay, there's open tabs, and I might have one that's on, you can have 5 screens now.
Yeah.
And so I might like swipe over and I might get to the 5th screen and I'm like, why do I even still have this tab open? And it's drawing energy. It's making the computer die faster. And yet the information is still accessible in a second. And so that's kind of our experience of trauma. So, last night we were setting our intentions with the full moon, and I wrote down a new income level that I would love to experience in my business. And then I asked myself, do I believe that this could be true for me? And when I really sat with it, I felt tension in my chest. I'm like, okay, the answer is no. And I realized like, okay, that's like an open tab. There's an old open tab that's been there for a period of time. How long has it been there? And so I just used my unconscious and I was like, okay, what age is this sensation? The answer was 4. And I was like, and where am I? What's happening? And then I saw myself at Christmas and my dad wasn't there. I don't get what I want was the belief system. And it was connected to my dad didn't show up for Christmas. And somehow, whether it's not rational, because inner mind, unconscious mind isn't rational, that's impacting my daily experience or belief systems around being able to earn, have, and receive money. So my zone of genius, my gift, is using symbolism and visuals and whatnot that unconscious mind responds really expeditiously to, and using that to be able to clear that. So once you close the tab, it doesn't just pop back up, right? There might be other open tabs that could be related to an experience you're looking to have, but I'm looking to create like the path of least resistance. If I want to go for a long, drive on the highway, let's say I want to do cross country, I'm doing that for pleasure, and also there's an end destination. That's how I look at business. That's how I look at earning money, is like, I want the journey to be great too. I don't want to just accept the fact that just because it's normalized and sometimes even glamorized, that there's potholes and we should just deal with it. I'm one of those people where I'm like, no, I want to have my cake and eat it too, and I'm going to find a way. And that's just how I've approached my business. Again, it's where it's like my ADHD just coming into play, where if it's not fun, and if I can't find a way to like create the sensation of ease, that doesn't mean it's always easy. I like a challenge sometimes. But if I can't create like the sensation of ease or interest around it, like I'm just out. I would rather go make money or experience money in a different way. So I'm looking to like fill in those potholes so the whole thing can be a more positive experience.
The process that I hear, and tell me if this is not the complete process or there are add-ins to it, for somebody who's listening and going, hey, listen, that sounds interesting, I want to try this too. The process I'm hearing is that you check and you set a goal and you kind of feel into the energy and you feel, are you called to it? And if you're not called to it, you check in why that is the case. And then as you check in that case, you may find some pattern, you may find some trauma, you may find just a pattern that's lingering or whatever it might be.
Right.
And then you go ahead and still appreciate and set that goal while being aware of this pattern, or are you saying there is a way or a path to release this pattern?
Yeah. So, I use rapid resolution therapy to support.
Tell us more about that. I haven't known what that is.
Perfect. Thank you for asking. So, my ex-husband was in the military and had really extreme PTSD. And in 2020, as we know, the world shut down, access to mental health support tanked. And he really started through his retirement. He was also due to retire that year. So now he has nowhere to go. He has no mental health support, and he has a lot of time on his hands. And just a rush of his PTSD came in and created a very, very traumatic experience for him and our whole family. And by the end of that year, we were able to get him into a treatment facility. But when he was doing traditional therapy, it was like they would unzip this wound and almost like taking stitches out and then completely open it up so that he would experience it and feel it and relive it and approach it and not avoid it anymore. And in 60 minutes, they would leave him filleted open, and then he would come back into our family life. And he was completely unable to. He would lock himself in the room for the rest of the day. He wasn't able to function. He wasn't able to be in the family unit anymore. And it came to the point where he was having daymares during the day and nightmares at night. So 2 hours a day, I'm able to work on my business. The rest of my day is supporting a 180-pound, 6'1" man with extreme PTSD. And I didn't realize throughout that whole process that I would have my own PTSD from his PTSD. And so when he went into treatment, I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to have so much time. I have 2 months. Like, he's okay. I'm going to be able to relax because I know he has a full team of people that have him. And I'm going to get so much done.
Yeah.
And then I tanked. Like, I was launching my second educational product ever. And then I was launching a physical product company at the same time. And by the end of it, when I picked him up after 2 months of him being in treatment, I was resentful because I was like, nice little vacation you just had. And he looked at me and he's like, you okay? And I just burst. I was just like, almost like I was like rocking myself in a white padded room. And I'm like, I am not okay. I am not okay. I am not okay. And I had been so used to just being so high functioning and just handling shit. Something comes, you just handle it. Stay at the frequency of the solution. And I just realized like I was crashing and I needed help. And I had done rage therapy and like, you know, like screaming in the car and meditation, and all of that was helpful in the coping process. It was really beautifully supported in the coping process, breath work, all of the things. I'm like, I'm a Virgo, you give me a checklist, I'll check everything off. And what I noticed was it was like playing a game of whack-a-mole. Like, it would just go down and then it would pop back up somewhere else. So every morning I was waking up and I would spend at least the first 2 hours of my day trying to move the energy of terrible anxiety, feelings of dread, panic, just constant worry for him, but then also our 2 children. My daughter was having almost nearly daily panic attacks at that point, suicidal ideations. Like, my family was falling apart and I was the only thing holding it together. And the thought that kept running through my head was, if you can just run fast enough every day, you'll be able to save them all. And that's all I could think about was like, how do I just run faster? And by the time he got home and I realized like, okay, he's okay-ish at that point. He had done really great therapy, but still had a long ways to go. And I just couldn't hold myself together anymore. And so I walked into this therapist's office. He's this stereotypical like therapist, just like a little bit of white hair on the top of his head, like somewhat balding, just tall, slender man, glasses on. His name is Wayne Brown. He's an earth angel. And I looked at him and I was like, I have this anger inside of me that I don't want to have anymore. Like this rage that I just couldn't figure out how to, you know, scream loud enough. Go to like, I would go to like one of those like panic rooms where you can just like throw things or whatever. I'm willing to do anything. And I was like, help me. I don't want to feel angry anymore. Because there had been some events during his PTSD where my mind was reading it as like feelings of threat, even though that wasn't actually the case. And I was like, he's done all this work. I feel like I want to create connection with him again. We're healing. Our whole family is healing. I can't let this go. And that's what the traditional therapy community was telling me. Just let go. Just forgive. And I'm like, I'm the most forgiving person in the world. I'm the most understanding person in the world. I'll do it all. But none of it was working for me. I would wake up. I would think about the event and instant rage. Like, just couldn't stop it. And so I walked in and I was like, I don't want to feel this anger anymore. And I'm like, it's probably related to, you know, like one of my, you know, early childhood experience of abuse and whatever. And I was like, do you want to explore that? And he's like, no. And I was like, okay. Do you want me to tell you about this and this? And he's like, no, that's okay. And he just talked and talked and talked. And I was like, hi, I thought this was my therapy session. And he goes, in the beginning, he goes, Andrea, I just have one question for you. Would it be okay if you weren't angry anymore? And I was like, yeah, bro, that's why I'm here. I showed up for this. And he's like, no, just check in. Would it really be okay if you weren't angry anymore? And I was like, okay, let me do the work. Like I close my eyes, put my hand on my chest, and I just ask myself, would it be okay if I weren't angry anymore? And I was so surprised that the instant response in my body was absolutely not. And he said, good. Why is that? And I said, because my anger keeps me safe. And he said, understand. So if you want to be safe, would it be helpful for you to have increased or decreased intuition? I said, increased. He said, what about energy? I said, increase. He said, what about intuition? Increased. What about strategy? Increase. What about focus? Increase. He's like, good. I agree. I want you to have all of that increased focus, intuition, strategy, energy, and creativity. And he goes, when you're angry, blood leaves brain, making jaw very strong so you can bite flesh. Would it be helpful to bite flesh in this situation? And I was like, probably not. And he goes, so blood leaves brain, making jaw strong, but you less intelligent. So now you have decreased of those components. I want you to stay really safe. So I would like for you to have increase of those components. And I said, yes, I want an increase. He said, I understand now. I'm completely okay with not being angry anymore. And then he just talks and talks and talks and talks. And 60 minutes later, he goes, take a deep breath. And now check for the anger. And if you had come in there with $1 million check and said, Andrea, if you could feel that anger one more time, because remember, instantaneously, I could have felt it before that session. I would have had to say, you have to take your $1 million check back. I cannot access it. And me being someone who understands and like studies human behavior, I was already coaching and teaching at that point. I looked at him and I was like, what the fuck did you just do to me? And he slides over this book called Life-Changing Conversations by Dr. John Connolly. Dr. John Connolly is the founder of Rapid Resolution Therapy. And I realized that how I had been approaching all of the different ways of clearing these energies that were creating a lot of conflict in my life could be gone in minutes, essentially, and gone for good. And what I had been taught was how to cope and how to just move them again and again. Rapid Resolution Therapy taught me there was an opportunity to clear for good. Still to this day, I can't access that anger, and that was years ago. So I got trained in it, and now I use it in all of my work. And the results that I get people and the testimonials, even in my community, from just like how I teach content has completely shifted. And the impact that we're making and the speed of results that we get people. Because as you know, a lot of the stuff disturbing us is just our inner emotional state.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I can see a power of good conversation. I mean, that's what it sounds, and I haven't read the work, so I'm speaking pretty uninformed right now, and I would definitely check it out with the testimony that you just gave. But it sounds very similar to some of the work that some of our friends have done. Called Marissa Peer, she has rapid transformation therapy. They use more hypnotic models,
right?
But it seems, our hypnotherapy models, maybe that's a better term, but it sounds like similar to that, to check in and then release.
So I had done Marissa Peer's modality previously. Only my experience with that particular one was a singular experience with a therapist. And then what I was instructed to do is for 21 days, I needed to continue a meditation in order to get the full results. The pattern just didn't last for me, and it wasn't caused for me. So the difference between rapid resolution therapy is we cause the pattern shift. We take complete personal responsibilities over your results, right?
Very much coaching-like, yeah.
Right. So that would be the difference only in my personal experience of it. I'm not trained and I don't understand the modality further than personal experience. But what I found was that this was instantaneous and automatic.
Yeah.
And that fascinated me.
It's amazing. I'm loving, because what I'm seeing more and more therapists that are curious and interested are using more and more coaching in their work, which I tremendously appreciate. I think that's phenomenal. The integration of therapy and coaching is absolutely phenomenal for human beings. dialing back to the idea of where we start, which is the models around money and what really causes us to restrict the money. One of the models that you share is rapid resolution therapy. Are there other models that you found useful that somebody could try to be able to let go of that charge?
The only one that I use is rapid resolution therapy because I just found it the fastest and the most effective. And I think I was the first person trained in it to actually start using it in digital programs so that I can start to impact people more at scale. So I've actually worked, Dr. John Connolly has become a personal friend of mine. He's actually here in West Palm.
Oh.
So I didn't realize that when I was trained in it. And he happened to mention, he was like sitting there with his dog on his lap. He's a 77-year-old man
Oh, wonderful.
who wears like Galaxy shirts when he trains you, just like a weird genius.
Yeah.
I deeply, deeply appreciate and adore.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. And so he's a good friend, and now we'll go have dinner together. And I'm like, but what about this one thing?
Yeah.
And I just have found that I haven't expanded beyond that because it's so fast and so effective.
Yeah, and why wouldn't you just utilize that what's already working and it's helping people? So that's phenomenal. Thank you for doing that.
Exactly.
So that led you to move further in your journey of releasing tension around money, if I may call that.
Sure.
What are the more common things that now you're observing that individuals may come through and say, hey, these are the charges that we hold on? Like one of the things that you talk about is something called family patterns around money or something like that.
Generational patterns, maybe. Yeah. So sometimes I've done some private sessions with people one-on-one where we'll look for a root of something. So it can be, the emotional charge can be adjusted in many ways. And sometimes it can be adjusted in a visualization technique where I can just be using metaphors and visualization that can cause the tab to close, so to speak. And some things need a little bit more of like a personal touch depending on like the root. And so somebody had come to me recently and she's like, I just have this deep belief that it has to be hard and that there has to be like deep suffering. And so when we did RRT privately, what came through for her was she saw or was perceiving sensations of coal. And she's like, oh my God, my family worked coal mines for the last like several generations. So the sensation that she was feeling wasn't something that she picked up in her life, but it was something that she was born into at a cellular level. That's rare. That doesn't happen very often. Sometimes, like depending on belief systems, like past life stuff comes up. I've had one personally for mine, which was like really fun and fascinating. But most of the time, it's things that have occurred in this life. Something happened. You had an emotional charge, a fear, anger, anxiousness, worry, and it just got stored and it can be something so simple like my dad didn't pay me attention. Like it's just there's nothing rational about it. But a lot of it can really, really effortlessly be cleared and in a way that's actually really enjoyable and fun. When people experience it for the first time with me, they're like, this is sorcery, this is magic. And I'm like, it's metaphors, honestly. There's a lot of science to it, just in how your brain responds. But we're really trying to approach money with logic and with the conscious mind. And we're trying to bypass that 95% that causes the emotional charge. And so we're constantly like that start-stop. Going back to what you said earlier, though, what do we do when someone has an emotional charge come up or they're trying to hit a goal? A more practical process that I start with is like, let's find where the conflict is in the journey for you. Is it in the process of doing it or is it in the process of having it? Having it would be like if I were to be rich and it made my dad feel some sort of way, my mind might perceive that I could lose connection with that parental unit and it would want to protect me from that, from losing connection. So my job would be to adjust that information, understanding that maybe dad might have some sort of feelings, but I would make it basically take the emotional charge of that and dial that down to a 0. The process might be how I'm thinking about doing it is too hard.
One of the things that I have come to an understanding of is that, like you were mentioning, the money is not only about the practical approach of money. That's something that we all tend to think, oh, that's what it is. 2 + 2 is 4, and if you stick to that life's going to work out. And that tends not to be the case, because most of the time when people approach money like that, they tend to find themselves either overspending, underspending, feeling fearful even if they have money in the bank account, because there is no, of course, yes, there is math to it, but the math is really for somebody that's maybe 4th grade math, maybe 8th grade math at best. It's not algebra or anything like that. It's addition, deduction, and percentages. It's something that you did very, very young. So math is not complicated there. But what is complicated there is often the belief system that we are operating from.
Right.
Are there a few beliefs that you have found to be tremendously helpful globally? By globally, I mean for most people. Of course, it's not going to be 100%, but for most people, you're like, if a person starts to believe this, it shifts the psychology of the person enough for them to create significant, or at least enough shift for them to have a little bit more faith towards that they could be wealthy too.
I'm not a huge believer, as much as I have faith and I exercise faith in many areas of my life. When it comes to this, I find it more useful to look for evidence instead of faith, because often
by faith, I mean believing something.
Sure.
I didn't mean God.
Right. Yeah. Well, even still, like, believing it will work out for you, right? And a lot of people have a lot of evidence to the contrary. And so that comes up and distracts people. And so what I say is look for the evidence first. So I have a funny little mantra. I like to bring a lot of like facetiousness in play to keep things feeling lighthearted around things that make big impact for people. And so I say, become a motherfucking FBI agent looking for evidence in which you're winning. And so I tell people, go search for the evidence, and you can always find it in numbers, actually. And so the area that creates a lot of suffering for people around numbers is the meaning. So I try to neutralize the meaning of it right away. And I'm like, okay, well, people use the word money, and money is equal to or anchored to safety. So I look at like, what are words that I can use to change the situation? So I look at my savings account as a trampoline account, because there's a lot of people who have belief systems around like, am I a good saver? I was told my whole life, money slips through your finger. You're not a good saver. You can't, you're not like responsible. Like, responsibility was like a huge thing for me. So I started renaming things. Universally, that works really, really well. Starting with that. The next thing is I might say, instead of...
Can you give an example or two, just so that people go, oh, okay, that's what renaming means. So let's say if somebody told you you're not good with money, or that's something that you said, or slipped through fingers. What's the rename for that?
Well, it's looking for the patterns that you can find power in. So someone might say, like, you've not been a good saver before. And so I might say, go look for evidence in which you have been able to set, not save, because again, that word will create conflict instantly. They'll have an emotional charge for it, but I'll look to describe it for them in a way that doesn't have an emotional charge. So I'll say, look, and sometimes we can look for patterns outside of money. And I'll say, think of a time in the past, mine's going to call this attention to you fairly quickly, where you had an idea for something, you applied a little bit of interest, and you're like, that's possible for me to do. Might be challenging, but still possible. Think of a time where you've applied a little bit of interest around something that was possible, but yet still challenging. And tell me what that is. And so they'll find evidence there of, okay, I did this one thing, like I made it onto the varsity soccer team or something like that. And I'm like, perfect. What'd you do? Like, what was that process look like? And we'll break down a formula for them of how they achieved going from this to this, because really all it is like getting yourself to move from point A to point B, and we're just looking to fuel the body to get motion. And so they'll give me an example, and I would say, and if you were, I did this with my sister last night. She's like, I just want to feel financially abundant. And I was like, I don't think you're actually looking for abundance. I think you're looking for surplus. She had conflict around abundance. She didn't have any conflict around surplus. I said, if you felt power around a certain amount of extra money above your normal expenses every single month, and it were a goal that made you feel good and excited, at the end of 6 months, what would that surplus look like? She said $3,000. And I was like, perfect. Can you think of an example of where you've created a surplus of extra money before? And she's like, yeah, I started Lyft driving. And I was like, could we think bigger than Lyft driving? And show your mind where you've created surplus before, and ask yourself, well, what would be interesting where I could earn even more than that? Who would I ask? What would I know? Where would I go? What would I think? How would I stand? How would I think? How would I feel? And so she just started with flipping the statement of I can't have abundance, I don't have abundance, to can I have a little bit of surplus? Is it a believable goal? People say, I just need motivation. There's only 2 ingredients to motivation: interest and believing in the possibility of it. We can back it down enough to give the interest, that energy to the body, and create possibility. She went from wanting to like be a millionaire someday. I'm like, let's start smaller.
Yeah. Make it possible.
Right.
Yeah.
Make it possible. As soon as you have those 2 components, energetic charge hits the body and your emotion. You can cause motivation. You don't have to wait for it. So we were looking for possibility, interest, and then we reframed how she described what she was shooting for in a way where she hadn't already built a lot of evidence that she couldn't. Being a millionaire, when you're making 60, 70 grand a year, feels too big for a lot of people. So like, what can we do? We can create surplus. We can look for opportunities that feel interesting, that create a little bit of urge in the body and also feel possible. And then we can start to build and layer on that as well.
So first thing that I heard was to reframe. And I think there were 2 ways that you kind of shared reframe just by words, or reframe the entire story by associating what's the behavior, if I may, that you have demonstrated maybe in a different area of life. So it's just easier for you to kind of then transport it over, because it kind of gives you an evidence of saying, well, this is possible for you. It's not that it's an impossible ask. You've just never done it in this particular area of life, maybe money. And then the second step that I kind of feel that you are just suggesting is make it more achievable in a way. Is like, once you have reframed it, not only just have this big plan that you may be able to achieve, yes, but it might take so long that you would just not believe it. Like, become a millionaire while you're trying to save a couple of thousand a month is an impossible dream, or feels like an impossible dream, even if it is not. Or it might take so long to achieve that you might give up on that dream much sooner. So make it something that's more tactile. It's more like, all right, wins for 1,000, can you say in 2,000 or 1,500?
Yeah.
It feels a lot more doable. You can probably have steps to it. You can probably move towards it because it causes motivation, like you said.
Exactly.
So make it believable. Any further steps to that?
The step that I would add to that is notice how you feel when you describe the situation. So for her, we said the same thing in 2 different ways, which was if she's making 7 grand a month and she wants to make 10, which is where she kind of started. Like, well, maybe I can make 10. I was like, well, she's kind of shot for the 10K month many times before. So she has a lot of evidence that hasn't been able to do it so far, but she's saying the same thing, but differently. When she shoots for 3K surplus, it's a different goal to inner mind where we don't have any evidence. It's the same thing, but it's just like wordplay.
Yeah.
Can we toss around and play with different words and notice, does this increase in energy in my body, or is it decrease in my body, energy in my body? If I were to take all my work and distill it down to like a very simple process, it would be, imagine having done it. If it increases body energy in my body, I'll do it. If it decreases energy in my body, I won't. And it's really around like, where do I hack that little emotional charge? That's my whole business. Whole business plan.
Yeah, no, but that's beautiful, because it is very important. We call it, does it feel expansive or contracting?
Sure.
Does it feel like an energy that you feel like, oh wow, this makes me feel powerful and more called to and more motivated, however you want to call it, but you feel it viscerally that, oh, I feel like excited about this work. Or you feel like, oh crap, I have to do this. That basically means you're feeling contracted, or any kind of emotion that is maybe on the lower scale of the Hawkins scale versus the higher scale of the Hawkins scale. And you would just go, all right, let's follow the ones that are on the higher level. Another thing that has worked in that context is I like to change the number. So sometimes what I would do is, the problem I have with people is most people have 12-month goals or a year-long goal. And a year-long goal pretty much never works, because year cycles are so constrained that you have so much story around it pretty much at all times. Because anybody that you meet, especially when you're coaching, they tend to be in their 30s or 40s, which means they have set up goals and failed at it probably for at least 5 to 7 years, right? Maybe even 10 years. And because they failed for that long, the 12-month cycle, while is the cycle that the businesses try to track because that's their financial year, all you did at all your school or college because that's how you're graded and rated. It sounds like the cycle to have. Instead of that, if I just change that number to 18 months, it tends to have them set better goals or have more trust or belief or be able to move towards. because now they go, oh, I have extra 6 months. So even their plans become a little bit better, because instead of saying, oh crap, I'm just gonna, pack everything in these 12 months, suddenly they're not trying to pack everything in 12 months. They're trying to go, okay, I have a little bit more time. I don't have to pack everything. I don't have to, really die on this.
There's no urgency.
Yeah, there's not as much urgency, and that releases that tension, that pressure, kind of like what you're saying. And because you've changed the number, now it's kind of they go, okay, that's more doable. So that's one more thing correlated to what you said.
Yeah.
Another thing that we found useful for our students is we tend to, before they set a goal, pretty much like how you do. So it's such a coincidence that a lot of our work is very similar. What we would do, we'll have them find evidence in the last 10 years of their life. So one of the talks that I do is called the 20X. And the 20X talk is you can 20X your life, whatever it is. And I give examples of how I have, but what people assume is, oh, you have 20X in a year, because that's the default that we think. But I say, no, I have 20X my life over the past 10 years, right? But it's over 10 years. Now suddenly people go, hold on, what? Right? And it probably not even 10 years, probably 5, but it doesn't matter. The point really is that most of us will not even aim for it, because we would think, there's no way I'm going to get it.
Right.
There's no way. It's like if somebody says, hey, build a $10 million company, build a $100 million company. Most people will be like, that's crazy.
Right.
But if I give you 10 years for it, give you the resources, time, the right coaches, the right training, the right business partner, suddenly you go, oh, shit, yes, I can, Like if somebody's trying to build a coaching business, let's say, and they go, well, Andrea is going to be your partner, build a $5 million company. They'll be like, yes, I can, because she has done it. And so I can probably do it too. Right? So your business partner, suddenly you expand. You don't feel stressed about it. You don't feel you're not capable. Right? And you also have 5 years. You're not thinking 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 months, 1 year. No, it's 5 years, which means you have time for skill building, hiring the team, learning how to make money, fail a bunch. And so what we do is we tell people to go, okay, let's think of your 5 or 10 years from behind and see how much you have grown in that time. Right? And write evidence basically for it. And most people go, well, I've failed so many times. But look at life right after the failure. Because when you fail, most likely you change something. You change something and life changed completely. Oh, I had a terrible relationship. I was like, yeah, and then what happened? Well, I learned from it and I had a great relationship after. So great. So now you know that you're not the same person. You found evidence for it. Now you can dream bigger going forward. Because now you can say, oh, I don't have to settle. I can go, oh, in the next 5 years, I can get to this place because I've done this before. So very much similar to what you do, just different ways of framing it, which I find fascinating. And I think it's tremendously helpful. Is there something that you found that is practically implementable? Because I know we said that that's only maybe 20% of the impact that you really can have until you work the 80%. But we've talked a bunch about the 80%. What would the 20% change that, in your perspective, is important to note when somebody's working on their money story, if I may? And not psychology per se, but money results maybe is a better word.
I would say from a really, really practical perspective, I have this concept that I've just used for myself called stacking, where you're right, the big goals, oftentimes it doesn't feel possible. You're not sure where you're resourced. And so what I started doing as I was really preparing for my first 7-figure year, we did close to 7 figures that year and then 1.5 the next. The thing that I started doing was I actually didn't set any money goals. And what I did was I started stacking satisfaction and things that felt good to have done. I looked for usefulness rather than strategy. And the difference would be there are plenty of strategies out there that are creating a lot of conflict with your belief systems, your belief about your skills, your belief about who you are, your belief about your worthiness. A lot of women especially wrap up their worthiness into their coaching containers. And so a lot of that comes into conflict. So I'm looking to create satisfaction in the daily process, but also in the remembering. And so when I started doing that, I was like, okay, what would be the ways that felt really interesting to serve my community, possible to serve my community, where I can see that I'm already resourced right now. Most of us are believing we still need to collect resources before we can even begin. And I would suggest that that's completely an illusion. I had a client who was selling a 10-figure product. She did $10,000 in sales in her very first month, and she had 300 Instagram followers. She was under-resourced, but so resourced in her belief and her conviction. And so this process of just stacking evidence of look, I'm doing it. Look, it's working. Look, this is fun. Look, this is interesting. Look, I feel satisfied. And what I did was I built myself into a multi-million-dollar company where I don't want to run from it. I feel really happy about it. And I didn't feel the pressure of like, well, I have to achieve this. That kind of happened as a byproduct. I really, really, I really lead with, I have a concept called, I don't make a 7-figure brand without making a penny from pressure, only pleasure. Pleasure meaning aliveness, pleasure meaning love, anything that would be like energy creating more energy. So everything for me is like, how can I do one thing that creates some energy and take that energy and propel it into the next thing? And simply put, I'm just looking back almost on a weekly basis where I'm like, this is working, this feels good, this feels satisfying, this is increasing my energy. And my energy just increased so much that I think I probably launched like 10, 20 programs in a single year.
Wow.
Because I was so inspired. I was so alive. I was so receptive. And we talked a little bit before this, like I keep things very simple. I have a high value of simplicity.
Yeah. So you're saying because you didn't have a money goal, and I'm just trying to make sure that I understood this, because you didn't have a money goal, quote unquote, you kind of went, because it feels so easy now that I could create and just be in the joy of creativity. Am I understanding this right?
Yes, I lead with the creative component, and then I support with more structure and strategy for sure. But it was less about the creative process and more about the fact that I could look back through my notes, and I just created a little note on my phone, and it was like, January, here's all the things where I'm like, yeah, it's working. And this is when I walked away from my almost 20-year relationship. So I was going through a separation, huge grief at the same time. There was, a month where my income tanked because I was really going through it. But what I did is I continued to look back at like, okay, what is the evidence in which I'm winning, and start to stock the evidence. And when I looked at January and then February, and I'm like, okay, even though I spent 2 hours in bed crying today, I also this, and this. And really my whole strategy, my biggest strategy for the year was exactly that. I would go and I would reflect and I would say, I won here. I won in how I thought about this. I won in how I approached this. I won in how I noticed where I was resourced. I won in the fact that I celebrated myself. I won in the fact that I asked for fucking help today. Like I just built, as honestly, it's one of my favorite notes on my phone, and I do it every year now. And I can look back and as I did that through March and then through April and May, finally, that's when I broke the 6-figure months in my business. And nothing else in my business changed from how I was previously running it, except for that one thing. So before I was like even selling anything that had to do with like rapid resolution therapy, this one piece was just like evidence. Like I had to create like a little Go Me Club.
From what I'm hearing, what you're saying is, one is almost a mantra that is something to the line of do what you can with what you have.
Yeah.
In a way, that's kind of become not necessarily become resourceful, but look at your resources and see what best can be done with it, if I may. That's one thing. So towards the end, you said this thing that I think is so powerful, and sometimes we all need it. And it's called, you said it like Go Me Club.
Yeah.
Which is almost like you are the biggest supporter of yourself. And at least that's how I'm reflecting on it.
Absolutely.
Is to say, wow, let's have our own team supporting us, which could be the mantras that are on your phone, could be a post-it note that you have around, just reminding you in case you don't have that support, which seems like might be the case when you were in that journey of that year where while you were being incredibly creative, but you were also seeing your income tank, and you were also going through this grief cycle that one would go if they were ending a 20-year relationship. And you got you. I think that's something that we sometimes we look outside so much that we forget. At least we got us. Tell us how that Go Me Club works. And I don't know if this is an actual thing, but it seems like a thing to me right now.
It came out of my mouth that way just now, but like in the essence, yes. And going back to the resources piece, I'm such a huge fan of like using questions. So instead of saying like noticing where you're resourced, I like to say, where am I resourced? Because a question opens up energy. A question creates expansion. And sometimes I might even see something that I wouldn't have seen before. So I love like the expansiveness in a question. And then where I use like definitive statements, it's in this like, I called it the stacking club because I'm like, I'm just stacking wins over here. I'm just going to stack my wins. But yeah, it can be whatever floats your boat.
Yeah.
Go Me Club. But I actually, what I did for this was I created this culture on my team as well. I had a small team of, I think, like 3 people at that time. And what we started doing was once a month, we would share with each other all of our stacking wins. And so each person was like, wow, we bought our first family car this week, or I was able to invest this for my son or my daughter, or it was personal wins and professional wins. And I'm so micro about this. Like everything can be a win for me. I'm like, wow, I made my bed today.
Yeah.
Like that's a win for me. Just anything in my it's interesting because the more that I started practicing it, the longer the list got. So when I started scrolling back through this one note, January was like this long, February was a little bit longer, March was much longer, and every single month because the muscle started getting so strong and my mind started understanding the reward in it, I was just giving myself this like burst of energetic reward every time I did it. And the list just kept getting longer and longer and longer. By the end of the year, I'm like, I am a motherfucking badass.
I would think that's a great act of self-love too. It's like just to learn to appreciate yourself and to be able to just say, I'm actually good at this. Because especially and I don't know if you feel that, but I feel that sometimes in our world, the world that we play in as coaches or as consultants or as trainers, teachers, however you want to call it, influencers, even if I have to broaden the category, you're just living in constant doubt because at least it feels like you're in constant doubt. I feel like I'm in constant doubt. Like, is this anything? Is this good? Is this just me thinking that I am, in this bubble where I think I'm doing good stuff, but it's not really. It doesn't. And sometimes somebody would say something like, "You're an idiot," and you're like, "Wow, maybe I am."
Thank you.
Thank you for saying that. So sometimes you need that Go Me Club, I feel like, or the Stackings Club, or however you want to call it, where we could appreciate the little wins. We can, okay, you know what? It's okay. I got up, I got ready, I went to the podcast, I recorded it, I posted it. It's okay if nobody watched it, but at least I did what I said I'm gonna do, and at least I supported me, if nothing else.
When we're building something and it doesn't have the momentum that not everyone gets to experience, like the hardest part of that is maintaining your belief and energy in it the whole way through. And that's what I was looking to cause for myself is I had hit kind of a cap as far as like where I had been able to take my business previously. And once I implemented this one piece, I was just completely blown away. And the other thing that I really appreciate about these lists is that the smallest part of each list had to do with financial wins, but yet the financial wins were automatic anyway, because I wasn't deterred when I talked about this. I have a private podcast feed that I just like riff on all the time. And I was like, what's your relationship with disappointment? Because mine used to be really bad. And for me, it was more in my personal life. I'm realizing I'm starting to date again and I'm learning about my belief systems about men. And one of them was like, I believe men disappoint me and whatnot. And I'm like, wow, I think everyone has a really shit relationship with disappointment and what it means about us. And I was like, what if we could reframe the concept of disappointment and turn the efforting into the win, the process into the win, and grab that reward and that gratification and use that to keep going so that we don't pause long enough to let the self-doubt create a time. Sometimes people have a very long time lapse with self-doubt.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And one more thing, I don't think it ever goes away. So you need to, not just I don't think, I've actually spoken to a lot of people that I would think were wildly successful from my perspective. And people ask me from my context and container, and I still self-doubt. It's not something that goes away. The thing that can happen for all of us, or what I believe we must aspire to, is to work on tools like Go Me Club, like stacking, like saying, all right, this is going to happen. It's not going to go away. For that matter, if it goes away, have you crossed the line of confidence and narcissism? Because it's a fine line, or it can be a fine line, maybe more narcissism.
This is the area where I'm like, be narcissistic.
Yeah. So the point really is to say it's okay to have that self-doubt, from my perspective, from my point of view, or to expect that it'll not go away. I think it's human to doubt, and there is no point becoming AI.
Yeah,
you are human, and there is appreciation in that, and that doubt keeps you on your toes. So one of the things that we've been able to do at Mind Valley Coach is we've been able to build programs that consistently hit the Net Promoter Score of 80 to 84, which is really high, especially for programs, for online programs. People usually don't even track it. And even if they track it, it usually is really, really low. 40 is considered really, really amazing in personal development, online programs, or even any kind of online program, because the engagement is not very high with people, and the change doesn't really happen that is promised. Our NPS scores are so high, and still when we are creating a new program, we question everything.
Sure.
And I think that's why our NPS is so high, is because we operate from a little bit of doubt that it may not work for everyone. So we always pursue it to go a little bit more than what a person may go.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what has created a tremendous amount of difference in what we've been able to put out in the world and be able to transform coaching education, at least what we believe, at least that we have significantly impacted it, if not transformed it, because we've been able to make incredible programs at very, very accessible rates at a really high volume, and creating communities of friends that other communities were not able to do until at that time. And one of the reasons is because we are constantly going, is this something? Is this good?
Is it good?
Is it good? Is it good? I don't know. Let's get people to feedback it and then take that and make it even better. Mm-hmm. But I think that self-doubt is good. It's just the workings with the self-doubt. I think that's the tricky part. If you don't know how to work with it, then it's going to deter action.
My dad was Special Forces Army and used to give us lessons all the time on things that most of the time went in through one ear and out the other with a big fat eye roll. Mm-hmm. And as an adult, I can look back and I'm like, Dad, you're so smart. I've actually had him on my podcast a couple of times, and my audience loves him.
Yeah.
And he used to always say, make peace with the conditions you're in, and then you can improve upon it.
Oh,
when
wonderful.
when you're in, he's like, if I was like, jumped out of an airplane, landed in this field, like I have a rucksack on my back, and I'm realizing that I'm jumping into enemy territory and I'm landed where I wasn't supposed to, I'm not going to sit there and be like, I shouldn't be here. It's like, I'm going to make peace with the conditions that I'm in and say, I should be here because this is where I fucking landed.
Yeah.
And let's figure out how to get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
Right?
I love that. Yeah.
Right.
That is wonderful. Yeah.
So I love the mantra for myself. Like, if it is, I should be. Mm-hmm. If it's already occurred, I should be. So let's make peace with that. And then we can look at the self-doubt as a teacher. Like, well, what is this doubt really trying to say? The doubt's trying to say, I really care about my customer having a good experience. And now we've transformed doubt, which oftentimes feels like something that detracts from expansion. And we've created expansion and power with it. Because it's like, oh, we just transformed it from doubt to care instantaneously. Because I was like, well, what's the meaning that's really useful to me here?
Yeah.
And oftentimes, like, that is why we have doubt as entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. Like, yes, of course, there's belief systems about ourselves that come into play. But
is there a message that if you could kind of like install in everybody's minds that people have kind of the counter of that message believed to be the truth, what would that message be for people?
This is the best question anyone has ever asked me. The number one thing that I work with everyone on, and it doesn't matter, like, my clients at this point have been anywhere between 6, 7, and 8 figures. Those are traditionally the people I've worked with in all walks of life, not just the coaching industry. I had a reality TV star. I had someone who was like a celebrity dog groomer, like just every walk of life. And the consistent belief system that everybody is walking around with, and it's like an energetic leash that's fucking with people, is I am not enough. It's not enough. And when I ask them, well, how would you know if you are? No one can answer me. There's no measurement for enoughness. It was a belief system that we adopted through moralistic programming of like good versus bad. And if we do good things will happen to us. And we all know that's quite bullshit. I can be a very good person and bad things will still happen to me. And enoughness is immeasurable. So if we can't measure it, we'll never know if we are it. And if we never know if we are it, we'll always assume we're not. And so what I suggest to people is let's take enoughness off of the table. One of my good friends, Andrea Crowder, said, enoughness and worthiness, they're pretty much tied together. And she said, she goes, worthiness is a fact, not a feeling. I didn't wake up today saying, I sure do feel 5'5". Like, it's a fact of who I am. It's a fact of what I've been born in with. And so this enoughness or worthiness is just a fact of being. And if we're looking for something that we can measure usefulness. We take enoughness off the table and we say, like, can I apply a useful effect towards this intention, this project, this person I want to help, a hobby or whatever? Can I apply a useful effect? Yes or no? And now enoughness has been completely taken off of the table.
Beautiful. I love that, because you also give a very beautiful tool right there. Like, define it and it'll probably be okay, and will probably happen right away. You'll realize, oh crap, I am already worthy. I don't need to get anywhere. I'm here. Yeah. Beautiful.
So resourced.
Yeah. Andrea, what would be some of the great places that people can find more about you, more of your work, and learn more from you?
I'm on Instagram primarily. That's the main platform, love_Andrea Crowder. My podcast is The Unruly Entrepreneur, and then AndreaCrowder.com.
Okay. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
My complete pleasure.